Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Management Diaries. I'm your host, Denile Doyle. This is MHN's Property Management Podcast, where we get into the real side of property management, from what's working in leasing and maintenance to the resident experience, to leadership lessons, business strategy, and everything in between. Today, we're going to talk about sustainability. So, sustainability has really evolved. It's become a lot more important than when owners were just trying to check a box. And today, it's actually shaping decisions, and it really has become more of a meaningful part of a firm's strategy and more of a priority. But what does that actually look like in practice, especially across an entire portfolio? Today, Cass McFadden joins me. She is a vice president and the global head of sustainability at Cortland. And Cass and I are going to talk about how sustainability shows up across design, across day-to-day operations, across the resident experience, and how the industry can think about ROI and the data that matters the most and has the most impact. Cass, welcome to Management Diaries. Thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Denile. Thanks so much for having me.
I want to start the conversation off with your role. Of course, you were appointed the global head of sustainability at Cortland in 2022. And this was a big moment, right? Because this was a new role that they created. Why was it important for Cortland to formalize this role? And then personally, why was it the right next step for you?
Yeah, in 2022, I was recruited to, like you said, this new role, which was really exciting, the first of its kind at a company at a senior level. And really, it was formalized because the company recognized that there was a need for a strategic leader in sustainability because there's so much to do. There's so much integration across the company that needs to happen. There was clear sort of investor expectation for having this as part of your programmatic structure and your reporting and everything you do across investments and operations. So I think naturally, as that need grew in the company and across multifamily, it became clear that it was time to appoint a strategic leader. As far as the role and what it would entail, I understood the different components of it. But this was really an opportunity to work with a company at the outset of the program when you feel like you're building it sort of from the ground up with everyone. It just feels like a huge opportunity that you can't miss. I also had the confidence to move into the role because some preliminary work had already been done by the firm to set up components of policy, governance. So I knew I was walking into an environment that was serious about it and ready to really go in a new direction with sustainability.
Wow, sounds like an exciting journey, Cass. And I know you have a really um interesting background, impressive background, right? Because you were at Bazooda, you were the VP of Sustainability, you were at Avalon Bay,
Mhm.
leading their energy management, and you were also just in the energy industry, right?
Right.
So really, really impressive. I understand what you're saying about building something new. It sounds like Cortland's need to formalize this role because it really, you said investors had the expectation for this to be a more meaningful part of their strategy, to really have the sustainability strategy and really have it be more formal.
Right, right, absolutely. I can add a little more color there just quickly because for folks who maybe are not as familiar with what is required of a sustainability program to not appear nascent, but sort of more mature, it's not just looking at the reporting frameworks and how you're doing there. When we receive questions from investors, they're asking about true programmatic details and data and longevity to everything that you're doing. So all that to say, what goes into the proof of your program is extremely multifaceted, right? You have to work with every department to have them on board, whether it's your construction folks or design, procurement, obviously operations, because they're so critical to the day-to-day function of the assets. And then as far as the investments component goes, we get questions around what are you doing at the outset for due diligence? How are you doing the underwriting? So there are a lot of different components there. And again, I think that's what created the need for a strategic role.
Cortland recently earned top GRESB ratings for two of your flagship funds. Can you walk us through what drove that progress, or what were the specific changes that made the biggest difference there?
I would love to walk through this. It's been 2 years in a row now, 5 stars for two of our flagship funds, like you said. And just to kind of throw this in there, I don't know if I thought it was impossible, but I knew there was a lot of work to do. As I looked through all of the indicators for, again, for the listeners, the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, which really is our primary report card, I saw that there were two sides that needed a little work. One is the management side. So that has everything to do with policies, who's making decisions. Internally, are you creating fit out guides for your assets, right? And then on the other side, there's straight performance. So, how are you performing in energy, emissions, water, waste? Are you doing an annual greenhouse gas study, et cetera? So, we really focused on refining the last few points, I would say, for the management side, because that was in pretty good shape before I got in there. But then the performance side, there was an opportunity to execute new projects at the asset level, to more closely study our greenhouse gas emissions profile, to think of sort of energy, water, waste pilots and projects that we could work with our teams to execute at the asset level. And it's been really great to watch our focus on that side translate to better data, better performance, better scores. It's really boosted our overall score. We've gone from 2 stars to 5 stars, which is the max that you can score. And I really think it's based on the performance indicators.
No, that's great that you've really seen as you've put in the work, right? Because it was a lot of work.
And it's the harder side, honestly. You can sit down and write a good policy. You can look at who might be across your senior leadership and really get that management side to score well. But performance doesn't lie. You have to get your data verified by a third party. So every point that you move is real. It's verified also by GRESB. That's just what makes it really exciting that you're making a material difference in your portfolio, which also has a double materiality to it because for folks who may not always speak the emissions language or the conservation language, they understand dollars, they understand savings. And most of the time, when you're able to make an impact across the performance indicators, you will also see a savings related to those indicators.
And like you said, GRESB is really good about that holistic picture, right? The policies, procedures, practices, performance, like all of it. So you really do know that you are, based on your score, you really do know that you are really doing all of these things intentionally and that it's making a difference. What sustainability efforts have been the most fruitful for the company so far? They've been really fruitful for
Yeah.
Cortland.
I never underestimate or understate what the integration factors across the different departments have done for the organization. Internally, that has been really important to see that shift, to integrate that shift across all departments. And it's exciting. We have a good governance structure where we repeatedly talk across senior leadership about what we can do to move the needle, really tight relationships with our operations team so that they can make sure those integrations are happening at our communities. So that to me as a practitioner is the most exciting. I think what gets read as most impactful is the change in data and the financials. For example, when we translated to renewable energy procurement and folks saw that we could now represent that we've greened our energy profile and achieved an annual savings for the asset, that's exciting, right? From an asset management perspective. When we're able to pilot new things and see that it contributes to a better resident experience, like we integrated our waste pilots pretty early in 2023. Ultimately, it led to greater sorting, reduced expenses at each community where it was implemented. Those kinds of things are exciting for the financial picture. The biggest impact for the resident is really across the energy, water, and waste data.
It sounds like there's a lot of opportunity to connect the dots, right? Like across design, operations, especially if you're reducing expenses, energy expenses, water expenses. And I think that connection Going back to the resident experience, that's a really interesting and important connection too. At the community level, are there any other ways that you actually see these efforts and these implementations impacting the resident experience?
Sometimes it is difficult to see the connection. We have worked with our internal teams who help create surveys to really get the direct residential feedback. We ask them at a high level, first off, how do you define sustainability, right? Typically, they understand this kind of energy efficiency, water and waste. Those are always the categories that are most impactful for them. The biggest area that residents seem to care about from a survey standpoint is the waste component. And so when we were able to introduce more diversion, which also meant more operational attention on those areas, we did get some positive feedback from residents that, oh, okay, I see a difference here. Translating all of our efforts into direct benefit sometimes is tough in multifamily, but we have seen feedback that residents do appreciate when we do Earth Month engagements that don't just span a day, but go on for multiple days because it shows that we have a priority in our organization for sustainability. The ones who really care about it, they're happy that we're engaging them, and also sometimes their kids because we have kid-friendly events. Moving forward, we are looking at solutions to actually drive down their consumption or usage pricing in the units. We're not operating in New York or California, where there are a lot more opportunities to help residents directly reduce their energy expense. But we continue to look for those opportunities, and I think our residents really appreciate that we are looking in that direction and that we are working on those solutions.
You're really doing the work at that level. How many operators are sending a survey that's asking, how do you define sustainability, right? Like that is really signaling to residents just how important it is for the company and how seriously Cortland is taking sustainability. And it was very interesting that you said the waste component, that area is where you really saw more feedback from residents, like they really noticed the benefits of that.
Yeah, most sites across multifamily will have the waste compactor. You might see a cardboard baler, right? And a lot of times, just seasonally, it can be challenging. Throughout the holidays, during move-in and move-outs, residents are focused on other things related to their comfort and their convenience. So they might unintentionally contribute to that stack. And it might just fall on one of those weekends where, okay, we have a shortage and we've got to call the hauler to make that extra move to the asset. But again, seasonality kind of adds to it as well, weather, et cetera, costs related to hauls. If you ever look at a waste bill for an asset, there's so many line items, like that last mile to the landfill or what it might cost to sort out the recycling, et cetera. So it's really cumbersome from that sense. Waste is always the most visible at an asset to residents versus energy. So with that being the most visible, there's the biggest opportunity from a resident experience perspective to make an impact. As we have introduced greater diversion efforts, I think they really appreciate seeing a separate bin for glass, a separate bin for plastic and aluminum. It makes it easier for them to sort things out as we introduce other programs that take away things like books, clothes, etc., things that they might just throw out of convenience. It creates a better experience in those areas.
And it's true, right? Waste is the most noticeable thing, the giant bin that's overflowing with trash. You see it sometimes, and especially if it just happens to be that kind of weekend, right? You're just like, oh my goodness.
It
Um,
happens. We've all been there.
and still we try to get our trash in there anyway. Like we've all
We
done
do.
that.
Right, right. The good old shoulder push.
Yes, just get it in there. But the same way that that is visible, it's like making these other options or diversions, as you call them, like where residents can really see we're really being intentional about the waste and how we're breaking that down and segmenting it. Even something like used books or clothes, I think that's a really big deal. The fact that you're offering that so that residents have another option aside from just tossing that into like their general waste.
And we recognize in multifamily, It can be a very transitory experience, and every resident is different. Some may live solo, but some may have that family of four. And as they're cycling through their lives, there are a lot of products that kind of come in and out, and not of them are not all inherently triple R focused, reduce, reuse, recycle. Every state is different. Every vendor or incentive or opportunity is different across our states, but continuing to optimize in that area is impactful for residents. And just to add a couple other things on what we do behind the resident experience, we try to be very visible when it comes to something like an Energy Star certification so that they know they are living in a community that is so focused on being energy efficient. And that's really important because essentially it's a preventative effort that helps to hedge against rates, reducing our overall load and demand in the market, which can signal to different grid operators that we might not need to be priced that high, which is great because hopefully, as we're procuring more energy just across the asset, that can be a lower rate. I think it's also important that we continue to pursue Fitwell. We were awarded back in 2023 for having the most Fitwell viral certified assets. That means is we are doing a lot of things across the asset to keep it clean, hygienic, preventing against sickness, and ultimately protecting the well-being of not just our residents, but our associates.
Again, that really is a signal of Cortland really taking sustainability and just a holistic approach to it, right? From waste to the quality of the building and preventing against sickness and being energy efficient. I think for residents to see these like systems that you're putting into place and ratings that you're taking so seriously, because that really shows that you're not just saying it, you're actually doing it. They're seeing that there's real progress being made here. I'm sure that that stands out to them. I wanted to talk a little bit about Earth Month engagement. I know we're not at Earth Month yet, um, but can you tell us about that a little bit?
Earth Month in April is such a special time where we get to see our community managers and so many operations leads shine. Typically, how we do it is we say, Earth Month is approaching. These are some examples of things you can do at the assets, whether it's teaching residents more about what they can do around energy, water, and waste, or even inform them about what we're doing. It spans the entire month of April. Some of them candidly will say this is going to be a multi-month effort, which is great because that means greater integration. And we really ask them for their input. You know your assets the best, what residents care the most about and want to hear the most about. So we try to capitalize on those nuances so that we're not just some kind of static one message Earth Month type of firm. There are many ways to do this. I recognize that some firms are more philanthropic. They might focus more on the corporate sites, but we try to bring this directly to the residents and make it feel personal. And everything is welcome. If you just want to rearrange or plant succulents and that's your way of interacting with nature, they may not always have access to green space or may not go to it, right? So those little opportunities to bring it to them, bring it to their families are important. Little waste sorting games are important. Talking about the community initiatives is always a priority because they might miss every email and flyer, no matter how many things we send out and post. This really helps our assets prioritize that time. And hopefully everyone can carry that with them throughout the year and see how serious we are about it.
That's great. The message of everything is welcome. No action is too small, right?
Absolutely.
I also love that you're not taking that one message fits all approach, right? Because this is across your portfolio. So each community is different and resident base is different. You're really leaning to your operations teams to say what will matter or what will mean the most, or where will you see the most engagement from your residents.
As an owner and operator, it really behooves all of us to convey what is most impactful, like directly to our residents, what we're doing about it and what they can also do about it. One of the consistent challenges across multifamily is we can't control what happens within the unit, right? And you might have some other areas where your maybe billing allocations are different, but you can't tell a resident how much to use their light or not to use it, how much to use water or not to use it. And we wouldn't want to. We want them to have the most comfortable experience. But sometimes through that education and conversation, that can also result in change behavior. And that makes a big difference when you're reporting whole building data, how the asset is doing through the sort of sustainability lens. And so, yeah, I think it's a really fruitful time to engage. Oftentimes, you might even hear residents say, like, I didn't even know it was Earth Month. I didn't know the 22nd was Earth Day. And even just informing them that this is not just with our firm, but it's part of a global effort. It's such a great way to get their creative juices flowing and really include them in the solution.
You're using it as a time to engage them, but also educate them because maybe if they have missed all of the emails, then, they're less
Yeah.
likely to miss it during Earth Month. That's when you can be like, just in case
Yeah.
you
No
didn't know all.
judgment. Again, we all do it.
Yes, no judgment.
Everyone's busy.
Earth Month is like an opportune time to be like, look at how we're making an impact and look at what our goals are, paying attention to that and trying to communicate that and educate them in that way without it being like, how long are you leaving your lights on? Things like that.
Can you imagine when the email starts saying that we saw your data? No, we don't see the data.
Or like, if we thought you were out of town, yet your light was on like the entire time.
And that's a whole other regulatory rationale for why a lot of operators don't have access to data. I just remember from my energy days being at regulatory commissions, there is a really valid concern for privacy. So, not to go down that rabbit hole, but we just understand if you have access to data and people's information of how they're moving about the cabin, it does give you different insights and you might make the wrong conclusions. So, yeah, we often do not have access to unit insights.
For good reason, right?
Right, right.
I want to talk about measurement, Cass, because the reporting side, especially when we're thinking about these ratings, GRESB, Fitwell, the reporting is the most important part of attaining these ratings, right? What data are you seeing that tells you the most meaningful story of how the company's performing portfolio wide and helps you make decisions?
Yeah, if I had to whittle it down to two things, it would be the utilities data and resident satisfaction. And I know we've talked about the resident piece, so you could just synthesize that into anything we do in sustainability that makes them happy, that might suggest that they want to stay or pay a premium. Great, 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 right? We want to continue doing those things. On the utility side, as I think about energy, water, and waste, if you zoom out just for a second, we have to remember sustainability is really born out of protecting the resources that we need. And there's also a climate conversation. There's this bigger alignment to a certain degree Celsius that we're not trying to surpass, right? And so everything we do to reduce energy and emissions contributes to hopefully mitigating certain disasters, right? Make sure that we're not consistently adding to that or the depletion of resources. And it's the same thing for water and same thing for waste. So, what I've seen in both the language of the investors and our focus is really needing to focus on that data, making sure that it's clean, actually representative of the reductions that are happening at the communities, getting that third party verification, and then continuing to put it in the reporting frameworks. We also want to see the relationship to the financial performance. So that from a asset level, asset management perspective or overall investment life cycle perspective is very important. Those are the 2 points I would say are most important.
So it's thinking about the actions and the immediate performance, but also the long-term value or the long-term impact.
And it's proof that we are taking actions that make a difference. There's a lot of conversation around don't greenwash, and the best way to not greenwash or and to be credible is to make sure that the data is showing the results that you want. Typically, if you're doing that at the foundation of your operations, it's the most meaningful.
Right? It's not so much like check the box work, right? It's not greenwashing because you really want to have your results to be credible. And that's why it's important that you're measuring what's giving you that credibility
Right, right.
with residents. And then, yes, they're willing to pay the premium in order to continue living at a Cortland community. They understand what the value is, right? Because you've established that credibility.
Right, right.
Are there any data points that you think the industry or should pay closer attention to, or that they're not paying attention to yet that they should be?
I think the industry is trying to dial in valuation. So, what accretive value are you adding to an asset by doing an LED retrofit or by doing a solar project or an irrigation reduction project, et cetera? Um, the industry treats this kind of differently. Some will look at these factors up front, some will not at all. Looking at the potential improvements to that value profile if you're even addressing greater energy efficiency, or let's say there's a building performance standard in a market. I think there's not a clear picture of how buyers might value these efforts. And I think some can be more straight lined if you do utilities underwriting and you say, okay, well, now you're going to use this much less energy. And so you can expect this additional value throughout the years once you purchase this asset from us. There are other areas that are not as clear. So if I told you, Danielle, like, hey, don't worry, I put in mitigation strategies for climate, you're like, well, I don't know if that weather event is actually going to hit and if that's that much valuable. So unless, for example, an insurance company tells me that this is going to save me money on a premium or whatever it might be, it's just a little more attenuated. And so that's where I think we need to continue to focus attention on so that we can make the right decisions in investment management and also across the operational life cycle.
It sounds like there's not a clear picture of how these efforts are going to be valued and sometimes how they're going to apply or if they're going to apply, where you're not just like doing things and taking steps that aren't really making an impact.
Yeah, this is ultimately this chicken and the egg conversation, but I think each firm has to determine where they're going to start, what's going to be part of your offering, part of your promise, part of your brand, if an asset is going to be offloaded. We believe that there's value in saying, oh, by the way, we've created these savings, et cetera. We might have already done an energy and water audit, whatever it is that the buyer would then have to take on. Whether we're calling it authenticity or transparency or good business, this is becoming more normalized in the life cycle for assets. And I think we'll really start to see more attention given to that valuation piece.
That's really important. What about misconceptions, Cass? Obviously, sustainability has evolved a lot over the years and the importance of it and the proven value and the impact on the business side, but I'm sure there are still misconceptions out there. What are some of the most common ones that you hear?
I've heard it all at this point, just misconceptions or that, oh, you don't need a sustainability program. What are you doing? Just running around planting trees all day? What's the value add? And why is it important? Is this just a feel good thing that we're doing? And heck yeah, I feel good about it all the time. But the reason is that, and I've had to learn to be more disciplined in this. I've seen colleagues, teams, everyone do this. You have to really speak the language of investments, asset management. You may talk about emissions and savings, but they need to see it in the format that they'll normally do underwriting in, right? So when you're showing that you want to do a X, Y, and Z reduction project, you can't just say, like, I think it's really great to reduce water. Yeah, we understand that, but it's like, what is the existing rate of water and sewer and potentially a tax bill in that area? How much are we spending today? What do we expect the reduction to be, sort of guaranteed by a certain time? And how is that, again, accretive to the asset? Misconceptions can be combated by the right language, alignment between teams, whether in language or goals. That's the best way to bat them away and get the results that you want for your business.
You have to speak their language or at least translate it into a format that they will understand and actually that they'll be able to see, recognize the value more easily than if you were just saying this is a good idea because it's the right thing to do.
And one other thing. I got to put a fine point on this. So many times, folks will engage vendors, see the potential ROI, and never track the future of the project. And it's so important to know the day the project has started, how much your cost was that day, and throughout that period to monitor with each action. You pick your time period, it could be weekly, monthly, quarterly monitoring. Make sure that you're getting those results. Anyone who works with me knows I love a pilot. I want to see if something's working so we can scale it. Look at those results. If it's not working, find something different. If it is working, now you have the tracking to prove it and to scale it.
So beyond just taking the actions, monitor the outcome, monitor the results. So looking ahead, Cass, as the landscape continues to shift when it comes to sustainability, what are you prioritizing at Cortland? What are you focusing on in the next 3 to 5 years?
So we talked about the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark, or GRESB. There's a huge focus on continuing to outperform our prior year in the performance category. So again, energy, emissions, water, and waste. We're also a signatory to the United Nations Principles for Responsible Investment. And that ultimately means that we are going to continue to deeply integrate sustainability into our investments decision-making process. So that's going to be a continued focus area. And then the final one is our net zero alignment. It's very exciting. It's something we got approved by the Science Based Targets Institute last year. Ultimately, what that means is we need to set short and long-term targets. So we're in that process now. But this just deepens our commitment, right, to energy efficiency, to emissions reductions. And I think what's most exciting about that is there are a lot of companies that have made that progress, and we know it's going to take collaboration, partnership. You need a ton of innovation, that authenticity and transparency that you talked about, right?
With some very ambitious goals, right? The net zero alignment, that's definitely a big one. So kudos to Cortland to really be targeting that and to be taking such a diligent, disciplined approach to continuing to meet these benchmarks with energy, emissions, water, and waste. I can tell that you're very passionate about this work, about sustainability, and I really make this a priority to help the firm reach these goals. To end on a lighter note, what's one thing that consistently brings you joy?
What consistently brings me joy? So many things. Anyone who hangs around me knows that I could be music, food, travel, all the things. But I think I would highlight my sons. One actually has a birthday today, he just turned 11. But I have two boys, 11, and another one turning 9 in July. They just excite me every day. They make it so much easier to consistently think about the future, particularly with sustainability. I've watched the transition of like sustainability being a curse word in corporate America to now being normalized, to watching my kids come home every day with like new recycling projects and sustainability terminology. There's a lot obviously about them that brings me so much joy, but they just give me so much hope. Of this conversation being normalized. And I just have no doubt that whatever they're doing in the future, this will be so part of their fabric and ethos. And I'm really looking forward to what that turns into.
I love that. I know I just found out that I share a birthday month with your son, so how cool.
Happy belated, so exciting.
Yes, so exciting. Thank you. And happy birthday to your son.
Thank
11, big
you.
year.
Right, right. Yeah, I always wonder if January is also one of those pressure birthday months because everybody's setting their goals and celebrating a new birthday, new year at the same time. So,
The answer is yes, it is.
right.
Cass, thank you so much for joining me on the
Yeah, thank you.
podcast. Thank you for really helping us take a thoughtful look at sustainability and how it can drive value across multifamily, drive value for investors, owners, and operators, and for residents, and have that meaningful and long-term impact. Really, really appreciate you sharing your perspective and your expertise. Hope your sons know that you're a sustainability rock star.
Thank you so
Um,
much. I appreciate you for having me today.
Thanks, Cass, and thank you everyone for listening to this episode of Management Diaries. If you enjoyed, Please subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We'll see you next time.